In this episode, we'll talk about the position of lights and how it affects the mood of the photograph.
AdoramaTV presents Digital Photography One-on-One, where we answer your questions. Here's your host, Mark Wallace.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Digital Photography One-on-One. I'm Mark Wallace. Well, this week we've got a great question from Jordan in Carlsbad, Nevada. And Jordan asked, I'm not sure exactly where to place my lights. Can you help me out? Well, Jordan, absolutely we can. In fact, this is a very common question. You know, a lot of people talk about soft boxes and different light modifiers and metering and all that kind of stuff, but where exactly do you put your lights? Well, that all really depends on what you want to do. There's light that's very flat, not a lot of shadows, and there's some that's really high contrast, or you can create silhouettes, all based on where you put your lights. So that's really what we want to talk about. So what we're going to do is going to go into the studio, and I'll show you some different lighting areas. I like to call them lighting zones, not to be confused with the zone system. They're not the same thing at all, not even close. But what I'm saying is there are different zones where you can place your lights, and it would be like a right in front of the model is front light, and so the zone would be maybe a 20-degree angle. I want to show you all of that stuff and then really show you what each zone does and the different lighting style that you can get, and then you can put all of those different things together to build a lighting scenario. So let's do that. Let's hop over to the studio and get started. All right, well, let's talk about where to place our lights. And to understand where we need to place our lights, we need to understand something about the position of lights and how that affects things like contrast and highlights and shadows and all the things in between. So to help us out with that, Amber is here today. She's going to be our model. So Amber, if you'll have a seat in that chair. Now the thing is with lights, light and the description of where you place your light is always in relationship to the camera. So I'm going to bring a camera out here right now, and I'm going to place that right here. And so now Amber's face is going to be hidden. But the point is, all of the illustrations I'm giving assume that the camera is right here in relationship to a model right here. And you'll understand this a little bit more as we go through this. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about some different places you can put lights. And there are three basic areas, or I'm going to call these zones, that you can place your lights. And so the first zone or area is in the front of your model. So this is, the light is coming to the front of our model. Now this doesn't have to be a model. This could be a mountain, it could be a product, it could be anything, but it's at the front of our model. Now if something happens, so let's have you turn this way, Amber, just facing me this way. Now it would seem like now if we had a light here, it would be side light because we're hitting the side of our model, but that's not the case because remember, it's always in reference to the position of our camera. And so if our light is here, we're still going to call this front light even though it's hitting the side of our model because it's in the relationship between the camera and the light. Okay, you can turn back this way again. So the first zone is front light. So this is light right here. The second zone is side light. This is light that's coming over here, and it's at a 90-degree angle from our camera. So this is coming into the side. And then the last zone is backlight. And this is light back here. That's behind our subject. So it's hitting the back of our subject. Again, always in relationship to the camera. Now each of these three areas or zones are good for different things. And so we're going to walk through each of these zones, and we've got some cool charts to help you understand where to place light. So let's get started by talking about front light. Okay, well let's talk a little bit more about front light. And when we're talking about front light, what I'm specifically talking about is light that is sort of in the zone right here. So from if the camera was right there, it's sort of this 45-degree angle, maybe a little bit less, that is going right to where our camera would be. And that's where I want to position my light. And so what I'm going to do here is we're going to start with positioning a light right in front of our model. And notice that the light is about the same height as Amber's face. We're not going to put it that close because I don't want to blast your face off. But we're going to put this about right here, and I want to take a few pictures, and then when I do that, we'll show you how those shadows fall. And then once we're done with that, we're going to raise this up and show you that you can move the light not only horizontally to change the look of the light, but also vertically. So let's take a few pictures with the light right here, and then we'll move things around. Well, one of the things we can do is we can change the height of our light, and that will change the contrast. And so what I've done here is I've taken this light that's still a front light, so it's still going right into the front of Amber's face, but I've raised it considerably. And so what that's going to do here is it's going to cause the shadows to fall this way, so they're falling behind her. The background is going to be much darker because the light isn't falling back there, and we're going to get a nice shadow underneath her chin. This is going to bring out her cheekbones. And so by just elevating the light, we're radically changing how things look. So let me take a photo of this, and then you can see the difference between a light that is low and straight on to the front and a light that is higher and straight on to the front, because it's a big difference. All right, as you can see, front light is pretty terrific. You can use it to be very flat if you have the light low. You can add a little bit more contrast or a lot of contrast by elevating that light. And that is a light that is used a lot for a key light or the main light. And it's used a lot in beauty photography. You can use different modifiers to really highlight cheekbones on a model. And having that right there in just sort of that zone in front of the model, you can do a lot of things. Well, let's move on. There's another opposite direction light called backlight. And if you add a light behind your subject and it's facing right into the camera, what that will do is that will add a highlight around the model. But since there's no light on the front of your model, you're going to get a silhouette. So let me take a picture of this light, which is right behind our model, and you'll see that we don't see anything of Amber's face. We just see a highlight around her shoulders and hair, and then we can play with that and do some more amazing effects. All right, well, now that we know a little bit about front light and elevation and backlight, let's move on to our next light, and that is side light. And in this situation, what I've done here is I have this light right here, and it's hitting the side of Amber's face. And this is a very dramatic 90-degree angle from the position of our camera. It's perfect side light. And what that will do is it'll give us a nice, very, very high contrast image, because what's going to happen is this side, the side toward the light of Amber's face, is going to be illuminated, and this side away from the light, is going to fall completely into darkness. And so we get a big difference between our lights and our darks, or otherwise a high contrast image. So let me take a picture really quickly of this lighting setup, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, well, let's start putting things together. And so let's say that we want to have a nice portrait photo of Amber here. So what will we do is, instead of using perhaps front light alone or side light or backlight, we would use something in the middle. And that's what I like to start with usually for my main or key light. And so I'll put this at about a 45-degree angle from my model, and I can move that around in a little area of about 22 degrees, and that's where I like to start with. Now, instead of having my light at exactly the same eye level, we're going to do what we did with our front light, and we're going to elevate this, and so we're about 45 degrees above our model, as well as 45 degrees to the side. And a smart thing would be to make sure you tighten that down so it doesn't crash down on you. But now we have this light that is off to the side a little bit, it's up a little bit, and so we have enough light to show the entire front of Amber's face, but we have it off to the side enough that we have some shadows, and so we create some contrast as well. So let's take a look at this image, and then we'll start building even more by positioning our lights in different areas. Well, just like we can use the front light to illuminate the main part of our subject's face, or the main part of our subject if it's products or something like that, we can use backlight to add highlights. And so instead of having a light that's directly behind our model where we're getting that silhouette, we can move it to the side, like this light over here, and instead of illuminating everything, we're just illuminating very, very specific features. For example, this light where it is right now just highlights Amber's cheek and hair, and so what we can do is we can use that in combination with other lights to get some really nice effects. But to make sure you understand exactly what this light is doing in this position, let me take a picture and show you exactly what this is illuminating. right, well, let's review. We've looked at several different lighting positions. We've looked at front light, we've looked at front light elevated, we've looked at backlight that gives us a silhouette, side light that gives us nice high contrast. We've looked at taking our front light and moving it just to about a 45-degree angle and elevating that, and so we get a nice, even, nice front light with some contrast. Then we took the light and moved it just about the same position, but in the back part of our zones, and we've illuminated just a couple of key features of our model. And so we wouldn't really use any of those lighting setups for a portrait or lighting a subject, but what we would do is we would put lights in those specific areas at those specific positions to create a nice look. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to add some lights, multiple lights, and we're going to put together a beauty shot of Amber. We're going to have some nice highlights on her cheeks, some very nice soft light on her face, a little bit of shadows, and some nice highlights on her hair using all of those different lighting positions. And then we'll show you each of those lights one at a time, and then we'll show you all of those together, and then you'll know exactly where to put your lights to build some terrific looking lighting setups. All right, well, what I've done is I've set up 3 lights and a reflector using all those zones that I showed you earlier to create a nice portrait shot, a nice beauty shot. So let me walk you through that. First, I'm going to move this camera, but you can see exactly where the camera is in relationship to Amber there. So I'll move that out of the way. And then let me walk you through each of the lights. So I have this light right here. This is our main light or key light, and it is at a 45-degree angle from our model, so it's right where we wanted it. It's not quite 45 degrees above her, but it is elevated, so we have a nice, some contrast there. To add some fill, I added this reflector here, and notice that it's on the opposite 45, so it's opposite our fill, our key light right there, so I'll move that out of the way. And then behind Amber, we have these 2 large soft boxes, and they are also at 45-degree angles, and they're elevated just slightly. And what that allows us to do is add some backlight, so we get highlights on Amber's hair, and we get some highlights on her cheeks, just like we did earlier with that single light. The difference is here, and you'll probably notice, I've added soft boxes to all of our lights to soften things up so we don't have those really, really hard shadows. So to make sure you understand exactly what every single light and the reflector is doing, we're going to show you each of these lights turned on individually, one at a time, and then the final image, everything all put together. Well, there you have it, Jordan. That's how the position of your lights really affect the mood of the photograph. Now, I'm sorry, I realize that Carlsbad is in New Mexico, not Nevada. Sorry about that. Well, also, we've talked a lot about lighting setups, lighting styles, and metering, and all kinds of things in the studio. In fact, we talked about basic lighting setups in episode 11. There's 7 basic lighting setups that talk about all kinds of really cool stuff. There's some really advanced setups in there as well. We talked about traditional lighting styles, loop lighting and open lighting and broad lighting and short lighting, all that kind of stuff. In episode 206 of Digital Photography 101, we talked about shooting in a small studio, maybe in your house. In episode 208, we even had an episode, a 2-part episode where we built a set and lit a book cover in episode 219 and 220. And for those of you that want to learn about metering light in the studio, well, we even have some of that stuff out there in episode 27 and 28. And so we talked all about basic and advanced metering in the studio. So a lot of information, and also I have this great DVD, Studio Lighting Essentials for Portrait Photography. This is my DVD that's all about studio lighting, and it has over 20 lighting setups and puts all of that stuff into practice. And that's available, the DVD is available at Adorama, and you can download it as a digital download at studiolightingessentials.com. So there's a ton of information out there for you on our videos. You can find that as well at the Adorama Learning Center. And so if you're new to studio lighting and want to learn more, well, I just gave you a bunch of stuff that's almost a full course for you to sort of dig into. Well, thank you so much for your question, Jordan. If you're like Jordan and you have a question about anything to do with photography or photography gear, send it on over to me at AskMark@Adorama.com.
This episode is brought to you by AdoramaTV. Visit the Adorama Learning Center where you'll find photography tips and techniques, links to the gear used in this episode, and related videos. For all the latest photography, video, and computer gear, visit Adorama.com. And the next time you're in New York City, visit our store located on 18th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue.
Whoop, whoop. I don't know. Let's look it up.
Digital Photography One-on-One is written and produced by Snap Factory. For more information about our workshops, visit snapfactory.com.